Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning and to welcome you to this webinar, which is an information session around the Historic Towns Initiative. The Historic Towns Initiative is a joint project between the Heritage Council and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. And it's great to see my colleague Dan Sinnott here this morning representing the department. This is a really interesting and attractive scheme, which we find is very, very popular. It has been running for over 7 years now, I think, Ian, around that. And over that time, it has led to the revitalisation of many towns across Ireland. We recognise here in the Heritage Council, as do the colleagues in the department, that significant work remains to be done to support local authorities, particularly in the revitalisation of our important historic town centres. We appreciate that the construction sector and getting work done in that world is increasingly challenging, and the costs are increasing as well as other issues around regulation. So we hope that this scheme, while it is modest, nonetheless is supportive of your objective to protect those really important town centres, which define the character of many of our important county towns and other towns that are peppered right across the county. I must say I'm not qualified in any way to talk about the terms and conditions of the scheme. If I started to do that, I'd just cause complete chaos. So I leave that up to the much more expert people on the line, to Ian and Amanda. And it's a busy time here in-house. We've a number of grant schemes open at the moment, and that's exciting and vibrant, but it also means that there's a lot of pressure on the staff. So I hope that you will bear with us in your management with us of applying for the scheme, and if you're also availing of some of the other grant schemes that we run, because it's been a busy office since last November, and we're very pleased that we will continue to be busy. Before I finish up, and I know Dan is going to say a few words as well, I'd just like to acknowledge very much the input of colleagues across the local authorities, the Association of Chief Executives, who are very supportive to the Heritage Council in their work, and we'll continue to strengthen our work with the local authority sector, directors of services, and particularly the architectural conservation officers and the heritage officers and their colleagues in the various sections, because without their hard work and professionalism, the local authorities would not be able to deliver this scheme. And I'm very pleased to say that yesterday afternoon, we sent out invitations to all local authorities for expressions of interest for those who do not employ architectural conservation officers to apply to our newly established scheme to support local authorities in the employment of architectural conservation officers. And that's something which Dan and I have been working to deliver on for over almost 2 years now. And it's great that we secured support in the last budget to fulfill our objectives. Secondly, we are also supporting at this time the employment of local authority archivists, and we would hope perhaps that our work in this arena will extend to other heritage professionals in future years. Dan will, no more than myself probably, and many others on this call, have looked closely at the programme for government published yesterday afternoon, and I'm very pleased that heritage features there, and it bodes well for building on the success which has been achieved over the past number of years. Thank you all for your participation, and thank you for all your hard work in delivering on the many schemes. I hope today will be informative and will be inspiring for those who hope to become part of this really important piece of work. So thank you again. And do I hand over directly to Dan, Ian?
Yeah, please, thanks, Virginia.
So thank you again. And Dan is my colleague, principal officer in the Built Heritage Unit in the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Virginia. And thanks to the Heritage Council for organising this morning's session, and for all the excellent work that you've done over the years on the Historic Towns Initiative. It's great as well. I would like to acknowledge just the importance of yesterday in opening that scheme for the recruitment of additional heritage professionals in local authorities. I think we'll hopefully look back on yesterday as a sort of a new departure in the future, and a really important day in strengthening the capacity of local authorities to mind and look after and promote the heritage in their that's part of their responsibility. So the Historic Towns Initiative, from the department's perspective, it's been a really successful scheme. It's very well established now as a part of the program of supports in place for the historic built environment. As most of you will know, it sits alongside a number of other schemes which are directly focused on conservation. So particularly, I suppose, the Built Heritage Investment Scheme, the Community Monuments Fund, the Historic Structures Fund, the new conservation advice grants for vacant traditional buildings. But it also fits in alongside and complements some broader policy and investment programs. I'm thinking particularly of the Town Centre First policy, the new Thrive scheme, the Rural Regeneration and Development Fund, and so on, which are all about placemaking in rural towns. And while you could look at these and say, well, they're doing all of this work at a huge scale now, and so the significance of the Historic Towns Initiative is in some way diminished in comparison. I think that would be really to miss the opportunity that's in front of us with the Historic Towns Initiative, because there's huge scope to influence the way these broader policies are implemented, and the approaches that the various investment schemes take to spending their money. So as well as the Historic Towns Initiative, then, as well as being an important scheme in its own right, and an opportunity to deliver real improvements to the historic character of our towns and to foster traditional skills and so on, as it always has been. I think the initiative, it now offers something even more, which is the opportunity to demonstrate what can be done, to provide a good example for other schemes to follow in terms of well-judged investment, which is informed by conservation principles, in terms of effective collaboration between local authorities, state agencies, and central government, and so on. So to demonstrate these approaches, which can deliver, a huge lift to a place and to the community of people who live there. So as always, I'd really encourage everyone to apply for the Historic Towns Initiative. As you know, there's work involved, but it's work that we've seen can provide a fantastic payback at the end of the process. And I'd say with all these other programs up and running, and with the opportunity to influence them, I think that payback and the potential impact is even greater now than ever. So the effort which you put into your application and into running the projects, if you're successful, I would say is tremendously worthwhile. And I'm sure I'm sure that those who have successfully run projects in recent years would all say the same. I know they would all say the same, that it's a tremendously rewarding program to be involved in. So I leave it at that. I think just to say thanks to all of you for joining. Thanks especially to those of you who will put forward applications, and thanks very much to Ian and colleagues for running such an effective and popular scheme.
Okay, thanks, Dan, and thank you, Virginia, for those words. So look, we've an interesting morning ahead of us. We'll be going to places like Monaghan Town, Tralee, Passage West. We'll hear a little bit about Middleton, And then we've a treat in store from Donegal in Glenties. We'll learn a lot about Brian Friel. And then we'll end with Amanda, Ryan, and myself just giving a sense of the application process, the criteria, and so on. So, without any further ado, I think we'll go straight to Monaghan Town. Cara Ward, the Heritage Officer with Monaghan County Council, and Katia Popelskaya from John McLaughlin Architects Company are going to give a sense of the heritage-led regeneration plan in Monaghan carried out over the past year. Do you want to fire ahead, guys?
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to start. So good morning, everyone. I'm Cara Ward. I'm Heritage Officer with Monaghan County Council. So I'm going to present on the Monaghan Town Heritage-led Regeneration Plan alongside Katia from John McLaughlin Architects, who were our appointed consultants. So first of all, I'm going to go through the process from a local authority perspective, which will hopefully help any of you thinking of applying for Stream 2 funding this year. I'm going to briefly run through just the history and the planning context, the application, procurement strategy, aims and challenges, and then Katya is going to follow on then with the process of developing the plan and the results. So 2 seconds, sorry. Just see if this is going to work here. Apologies. Okay, so can you see that? Has it moved to the next slide? Okay. Yes, I take it has.
Yeah, it's fine. It's good.
Okay,
Yep.
great. 2 seconds. Okay, so sorry. So the history then of Monaghan Town is it's mainly owes much of its development to the plantation period and the 17th century, although the area was occupied for over 100 years prior to that. And the earliest references to Monaghan are actually from the 14th century when the McMahon family established their primary residence on the Convent Lake in the Crannog. And then, as I said, it developed many of its characteristics then during the Ulster plantation. So that central market square, the diamond with this principal centre of administration, religious buildings, commerce, were common in mid-Ulster towns. And Monaghan then grew commercially with the development of the road, the Ulster Canal, and the railway network, and flourished in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries then with the linen, a centre for linen and agricultural production. Jeez, sorry, this keeps flicking off on me. It's just struggling here to move on. Next screen. Apologies, this is actually. Are you able to move it on? No.
You know what we could try? If you take it down, I'll share it and I'll see if I can move it on.
Aye, okay.
'Cause-
It's just not letting me. Apologies
Okay.
about this.
No, just give me a minute now.
Or I can try it again. It may work better now when the other screen's gone.
Okay.
I'll try it again.
Okay. You try it again. If not, I'll upload it or share it.
All right. Is that it? Yeah. Okay, so then in the context, Monaghan has ambitious plans for a decarbonisation zone alongside projects such as the reuse of the St. Louis Convent buildings, which the council recently acquired, as well as recent regeneration projects on Dublin Street. We also have a new Peace Campus and initiatives to address vacancy and dereliction. So the impetus for this plan came about following on from much of the work being carried out by the regeneration team in the council, including Maura Cullinan, who presented at this webinar last year on the HDI-funded Dublin Street regeneration project. So much of this work had identified the need for a heritage focus to regeneration in the town. As Virginia mentioned earlier, we're one of those counties that don't have an architectural conservation officer. So it was really important to have this sort of guidance for us. So with a high level of vacancy and dereliction and that understanding that intervention was needed to address these problems, combined with housing pressures that we're seeing everywhere. So and alongside that, as we've recently had a phase of acquisition of many of these vacant and derelict properties by the council. So a strategic approach was needed to examine the existing heritage of the town and determine what conservation focused interventions were required to inform future grant applications. It's gone again. Don't know why it's doing this every time I go. All right, sorry. So the next stage then was to apply for the funding. So we applied for Stream 2 funding, which is up to 50,000 for heritage-led plans. And to get the application ready, we also had to do a business appraisal and get senior management support. And we did some early engagement with stakeholders to get that letters of support for the application. And the next stage then was the procurement strategy. Oh, sorry, the procurement itself. So we were awarded the funding. We got the full amount, which was €50,000, and we accepted that. We had to get a commitment then to match fund at least 20% of the total spend. One of the conditions of our funding was that we would agree the tender brief with the Heritage Council prior to issuing that, and as well as that we would appoint a multidisciplinary consultant team with conservation accredited professional. So we specifically asked then for a team with a background of experience in and success in heritage regeneration and master planning and project management. And we stipulated the need for a senior conservation architect accredited at grade 2 or above to lead the consultant team. So we strongly felt that this was an important part of our brief because as I mentioned, we don't have an architectural conservation officer in-house, so we really wanted that expertise and that guidance and alignment with conservation principles and standards and guidance. We also wanted a partnership approach, which would use the internal expertise that we do have in regeneration and heritage and community engagement. We outlined the consultation and engagement process, and we clearly defined outputs and timescales, suggested milestones and completion dates of key stages. As well as that, we required a timeline and a work plan immediately following appointment and specified minimum number of meetings and highlighted the requirement for presentations to elected members and the client project team. So the aims of the plan were to provide a positive roadmap for the successful heritage-led regeneration of Monaghan Town, which would help to fulfill its potential as a historic town. And we wanted the plan to consist of a strategic aim, a series of aims and objectives then to include policy recommendations, which would then lead into the county development plan, which was being developed at the same time. And we wanted the plan to include targeted and focused conservation interventions on specific buildings and sites. And we wanted the plan to promote high quality design, which respects and enhances the historic character of the town. But probably most importantly for us was an implementation action plan with a range of projects with key stakeholders, indicative times for delivery. And this was to provide the basis for us to seek support from multiple funding streams, including future HTI competitions. So as a matter of fact, I'm hoping to apply this year using the plan to target some of those. So just to quickly run on, because I know we're tight for time and Katja is going to go through the nice bits, show you the actual plan. So the timeline was roughly the same time last year. Mid-February was the application deadline. In March, we were awarded the funding, and then we developed the tender brief and procurement documents. In May, we went out to tender, and then we were able to award the contract in early July. And then end of October was our deadline for the final report. That's to give us time to get everything together, make sure everything was finalized for recoupment in early November. So some of the challenges we had was a bit of a complicated procurement. This was because in tandem or at the same time as this HTI application and funding award was coming through, we were also in the regeneration team applying for Thrive funding for the town. So without knowing whether we had received that funding or not, we had to include an urban land use strategy for Town Centre First plan for the town and an options paper for the St. Louis Convent lands as an option on the procurement, so that when we were awarded the funding, that we could award that tender to the successful tenderer. So that is what happened in the end, and it actually worked out quite well, even though it did delay our procurement a little bit and left us with a tighter timeline. But having the same team on board for both projects, I think really benefited both the Thrive and the HTI plan, because we had that dedicated resource from the team, this consultant team, which really put a lot into it and managed to deliver everything in time. And as well as that, they brought to bear, I suppose, that heritage focus into the Thrive part as well. So that was really important to us. So yeah, and aside from that, we had great community support and engagement on the plan, fantastic collaboration, and most importantly, a usable plan, which, as I said, we are using this year. So that's me, and I'll thank you and hand over to Katja now, who's going to present on the rest of the plan.
Thanks very much, Cara.
Stop sharing. Is that stopped now?
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Great.
Yes.
Excellent. So, hello everyone. So my name is Kasia. I'm a Grade 2 conservation architect with John McLaughlin Architects, and we were the appointed consultant for the HTI initiative from Monaghan Town last year. We were the only consultant on board, and we have multidisciplinary skills in-house. So we were conservation architects. We did all the public engagement, and we have urban master planning experience as well. So it was great actually that we had everything in-house, and it allowed us to move forward quite quickly and coordinate all the tasks quite well. So our project brief was Monaghan Town Centre. It was the town centre boundary as defined in the Monaghan Development Plan, and the focus was these conservation areas in the development plan, which are defined by pretty much just the street frontages. So in the course of the project, we looked at expanding the boundary of the HTI initiative in our brief into the St. Louis Convent lands for various reasons. Firstly, because these lands were newly purchased by the council, so they became public. The history of St. Louis Convent on the edge of the town centre was hugely important to the development of the town. It was a big educational complex, wonderful historic convent buildings, and a great green amenity as well. So together with the Peace Campus that's newly built at the north of the town, we felt that the two had to really be considered as part of the Heritage Towns, as the Historic Towns Initiative. This is just an aerial image of the convent building. So it's a wonderful group of buildings recently in use by St. Louis Convent in Monaghan. And the buildings around here are now in Monaghan County Council ownership, and they're vacant, and they needed a new use. So that was part of another exercise that we undertook in parallel to the HTI. And we felt that they had to be part of the HTI report as well. So we did a lot of baseline research as well, as kind of the usual mapping and so on. We consulted the local studies library, but for us it was quite important to understand what made Monaghan Monaghan, what defined its historic character. So, as Cara mentioned, the development of its streets with arrow plots, the two lakes, the Convent Lake, which is part of St. Louis Convent, with the Cranach still in place on the little island in the centre of it. And just the form of the town and so on. So we looked at maps, we analysed them quite carefully. We tracked when the streets and the buildings came about, what was the cause of it, and then we looked at a lot of historic photographs. We really like looking at historic photographs as part of these exercises, just because they show the towns in use. They show clean, decluttered streets before traffic and cars and parking took over, and just sort of the lovely buildings and materials that come across a lot better without the advertisement signs and all the services and so on. And we looked at the social history of the town, the Monaghan bombings, the industrial history, which is the canal and the kind of more modest industrial buildings around the town centre. And we did a separate little baseline study of the St. Louis Convent site, which is a fantastic example of adaptive reuse. In the 1800s, the convent took over an old brewery complex, which was disused, and the buildings were adopted, and the convent grew within the site. Gardens and sports pitches and so on. So, and the history of the convent as an educational complex and as a mother convent of St. Louis Order in Ireland was really important, and the public responded incredibly to us presenting this information at the public consultations. There was a lot of connection between the Monaghan citizens and the convent in terms of going to school there, going to the chapel, weddings, remembering the lake, remembering the grounds. So it was lovely to hear all the stories about it. We made some of these analytical maps, kind of tracking open spaces, mapping heritage protection within the town. So NIH record of protected structures, which was a list on the Monaghan plan, but it wasn't mapped anywhere previously. The ACAs and the sites and monuments record. So these are a comprehensive set of maps, which we hope any development in the town would going forward would be informed by, and that they can be used by other design teams going forward. And then this is a little map of the St. Louis Convent area in itself, which are a lot of lovely protected structures, and the Cranach is number one there. We listed the historic monuments in the town. So Monaghan is quite special. There are a lot of little, there are these three monuments in the open squares, one of which has been relocated over the course of the time. So we felt it was quite important to acknowledge those, and they're landmarks within the town, and you see them from various vistas. And then other landmark buildings, we also mapped, a lot of them quite prominent, and a lot of them have lost their prominence over time, and some of them have become vacant. So we felt it was important to highlight them and to sort of describe them properly within the context of the town. And we did quite a lot of field work as well. So we were on the ground quite a lot, and we looked at the more modest buildings as well, and typologies and buildings that are kind of unique to Monaghan and are part of its historic character. Some of these buildings frequently get forgotten and don't get much attention. So we thought it was important to highlight those. Again, to inform any future interventions or funding initiatives that might be applied for. And we also looked at building features and materials that were specific to Monaghan town. So particularly the industrial buildings, some of the backland sites that, again, we felt weren't given enough prominence or attention. And the lovely kind of soft yellow sandstone that was that came from local quarries, that was used on a lot of the local buildings, was a lovely feature that we felt needed recording. So following all that, at the end of the baseline study, we produced this map which highlighted historic character areas, which is it's a tool that's used more in the UK, but it's sort of it builds on the baseline research and the historic development on the town, and it identifies specific areas within the historic centre that would have a unique character, and it might be to do with the plot widths, the types of buildings, the streets, or phases of development. So it's a really useful tool to plan interventions and actions within the town, and it kind of defines areas that have certain qualities that are different to others. So, for instance, Area 4 here is the area around Peters Lake, and the buildings around it and the plots have a little bit more space and a lot more greenery around it. So one of the actions that we proposed was a landscaping plan and reinstatement of a line of trees along North Road here, specific to that area. And then we held quite a lot of consultations. We produced a stakeholder management plan, which was part of our brief, and it took a little bit of time to list and contact all the groups. So there were loads of groups and societies that were quite happy to speak to us. And we tried to include young people, old people, people from backgrounds people that wouldn't usually maybe attend public consultation events. So we made space to just meet them and talk to them. And lovely stories came about, and it was really good to get a more kind of a broader feedback from a larger group of people. So we felt that exercise worked quite well, and we felt a lot of that kind of engagement can again feed through to future projects. We were very delighted to see the work that was already in hand with the regeneration team in Monaghan Town, and the properties have been identified. There's been a lot of engagement with the owners of the buildings. There's already a lot of CPOs. There's a lot of grants that are already in hand to bring buildings back into use. So we built on the work that was done to date, and it really helped us to go forward with it. Sorry, just as we actually consulted the Heritage Council during the process, just because there's been already involvement between the Heritage Council and the regeneration team. So we tried to identify buildings which going forward might best benefit from the HTI funding, and we included them in the action plan. We put forward some heritage policies that are a lot of them would be already there in the Planning Act and the development plan, but we felt it was good to lay them out in plain English, and so that if anybody who's the owner of one of these lovely historic buildings, or future design teams, or even somebody within Monaghan Council had a clear picture of the do's and don'ts and what should happen in Monaghan Town. And we made a special emphasis about preventing the loss of historic character, and writing out, I suppose, what historic fabric should be retained and repaired rather than removed, because a lot of that during our field work, and the enforcement, unfortunately, wasn't there at the time. And as Cara mentioned, appointment of an architectural conservation officer we thought was quite important to any historic heritage-led initiatives in the area going forward, and also to support regeneration within the town. Then our action plan comprised 15 actions. They ranged from reports and studies to projects and some strategic projects, and some of them were kind of easy wins. Actions that could be taken through immediately with support of the Heritage Council, and some were more long-term actions that were interlinked with other initiatives in the town, and maybe needed the rearrangement of traffic and roads and the establishment of the bypass, which is in the works. So we looked at an action to establish a palette of materials and street furniture for the town to guide future development. A shopfront strategy document that has been done successfully by other local authorities. A review of the conservation areas, which we felt was important just because the existing conservation areas focus primarily on the frontages of the street, and we felt the backland sites should be examined for inclusion within the conservation area boundary. We also felt because St. Louis site, the convent site, was a group of lovely historic buildings that had a relationship to one another and their site, that there was merit in including St. Louis site as a new conservation area in Monaghan. And one of the actions was a review of the Heritage Trail, again with the Peace Campus in place in St. Louis, and the canal. We felt there was merit in expanding the existing trail that's quite popular. And some of the more strategic projects were public realm projects, and we produced these sort of very high-level sketches on how some of the streets and open spaces can be improved and enhanced. So it's very high-level exercise, and it's something that would be taken forward with sort of Monaghan County Council teams and multidisciplinary teams doing a proper exercise on these. This is the St. Peter's Lake kind of landscaping action that I mentioned earlier, just about greening and biodiversity. And the tidy towns actually in Monaghan were quite excited about this, the idea of using laneways as green routes and pedestrian-friendly ways. And we put forward the actions to restore or repair 2 of the monuments, and this was one that came up in public consultation quite a lot. So it's the Rossmore Monument in the centre of town, and its sandstone is actually in quite a poor condition. It's been eroded. It's quite a soft stone. So we've been speaking to Cara and her colleagues about funding to actually do a methodology for the repair of this monument, and we felt that the repair had to be accompanied by a grade 1 architect report about what to do with the stone and whether a reinstatement of some of the features might be a good idea. And cleaning of the top of the Dawson Monument was another action. These are the vacant buildings that we highlighted as possible HTI actions going forward. So this is the old museum building. That's the function of the museum was moved to Peace Campus. So it's a lovely but now vacant building, and the council are thinking of what to do with it. So it has no level access at the moment, and we felt a strategy to provide step-free access to this building to remain in public use and an active use was extremely important. So that's one of the actions that we highlighted. And then this building, it's an assembly house, and it suffered quite a lot of fire damage. It needs a lot of work and a lot of funding to bring it back into use. But its forecourt, we felt could be a little project under the HTI as like a meanwhile used as a little public park on one of the main streets while the building, a future is being established. And then lastly, the facade restoration of these 3 lovely buildings on Dublin Street was the project. We found a gorgeous photo of the buildings from the 70s, I think, when 3 facades read very well as a group. The stone finish was consistent and the old wide timber windows were in place. So we felt that it could be a nice initiative in conversation with the building owners to restore the facades back to their to restore the character of those facades. And this is just the last building on one of the on Market Street near the Market House, and quite a prominent location. Again, some fire damage. And we suggested that maybe some HTI funding could be applied for to just restore the front and help the owner to bring the building back into use. So that was it. We really enjoyed working on the project. Great support and great collaborative effort with ourselves and Monaghan County Council and the local community and the town team. So I think everybody was quite happy with how it finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katia, and thank you, Cara. We're a little bit behind, but we're going to keep going, obviously. Our next speaker is Colette O'Connor, and Colette is the Chief Executive with Tralee Chamber Alliance. And this wasn't the HTI project last year. This came in under the Heritage Council's Community Heritage Grant Scheme. And I thought it would be really interesting today because it's not often that you hear about a local urban chamber getting engaged in heritage projects. And we thought, the project is really interesting. It speaks to the kind of things that we talk about and do through the HTI, but that it's great to see chamber getting involved like that. So it's a really interesting project. So I'm going to hand over to Colette now. Do you want to share your slides, Colette?
Yes, thanks, Ian. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully this will work now. Hey, Everybody see that?
Yeah, if you want to go to,
Yeah, just clicking there now.
yeah.
There we go. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thanks, Ian. I'm delighted to be here, feeling a little bit out of place as I'm not local authority, but and I suppose when I'm talking through our presentation here in our project, it's very much from, I suppose, our perspective, and it's not as probably detailed as some of the other presentations this morning, but happy to provide any information to anybody after this. My details will be available to whoever's on the webinar this morning. So a little bit about myself. I am currently Chief Executive of Tralee Chamber and have been since 2021. Prior to that, I was the administrator for Listowel Business and Community Alliance, which we founded back in 2017 in Listowel. And actually, we did a fantastic project with the Heritage Council in Listowel during that time around the Pat McCall of Stuco Art with these wonderful architecture in Listowel. So have been aware of the absolute huge benefits of engaging with the Heritage Council for quite a while, and it's just a case really of identifying projects. And I suppose a thing that groups such as ourselves, I mean, a Chamber of Commerce is essentially we're a business membership organisation. We represent the interests of our businesses, our members, but also part of that is in enhancing our own place, enhancing where those businesses are and enhancing our community. Tralee Chamber is very fortunate to have had a very long-standing relationship with Tralee Tidy Towns going back as far as 1989. I think the then president of the Chamber, Billy Nolan, was also the secretary of Tidy Towns, and moving on 36 years later now, I'm the current CEO of the Chamber and treasurer of Tidy Towns. So that relationship is key. And I think, to get to know a place, there's nothing more beneficial than picking up litter on a Saturday morning or doing a bit of painting, upgrading buildings, because you can really see then, you get to know the buildings, you get to know the streets, you get to know where there might be potential to make improvements. So I suppose where this particular project came from, Castle Street. Castle Street would have been a huge part of the history of Tralee. But in recent years, there's been less focus on it. There's been fantastic public groundwork carried out by the local authority, Kerry County Council, who are fantastically supportive of the Chamber and projects. We work collaboratively on a number of things throughout the years. But Castle Street hasn't quite got there yet. There are plans in the future, but I suppose a lot of the focus has been on Denny Street, the Mall, and other areas. So this all sort of really began this time last year in January. We planned to do a walkabout of Edward Street, of the Castle Street area. A number of us, we formed a committee. There was myself from both the Chamber and Tidy Towns, Kevin McCarthy, former president of the Chamber, also in Tidy Towns, one of the vintners, and our former county archivist, Mike Lynch, the County Library, and Victoria McCarthy, the Conservation Officer with Kerry County Council. And really it was identifying what could we possibly do. The first thing we wanted to do was address the vacancy and businesses that could clearly do with a lick of paint, clearly do with a bit of an injection of I suppose people are kind of they're when you're in business at the moment, and you can see it, there's huge challenges in terms of the cost of employment, in terms of just keeping afloat basically. So sometimes keeping your building in a good state can be very, very challenging from a financial perspective and from just a day-to-day perspective. So what we were hoping to do at the beginning was to kind of find a way to support these businesses that might not be in a position to do up the properties themselves. We'd get volunteers, we'd go out on Wednesday night, we'd paint where we could, we'd get the paint sponsored, we'd part pay through fundraising. But as well, there's huge history, and Tralee it has a massively rich heritage. So this fund came up last year, and Victoria identified it for us, and we set about putting a project together. We went out. What we really wanted to do was to get a complete conservation study done on the area. We also wanted as well to bring the businesses in a bit, because as a chamber, we're the largest business group in the county. We're one of the largest chambers in the southwest region, and our members spread beyond Tralee, but the heart of our chamber is in Tralee Town Centre, and that's where everything began, and Castle Street is vital in that. So it's been quite difficult for us over the years to bring some of the older businesses back on board. They feel a bit disenchanted with the way things were going. So this project really had a lot, for what started off very small as a simple of let's just try and get people to wash their windows and paint, became a much bigger animal, and we were thrilled when we were approved for the funding. We were very fortunate to have the expertise of JCA Architects. I've used some of their there are shots from the report today in this presentation just to give you a sense of it. And you can get a sense here of Castle Street itself, the different areas there. You can see the where it was and the busy thoroughfare that it was. It dates back to the Earl of Desmond. It was the main urban centre in the entire county of Kerry since the 16th century, and it derived its name from Tralee Castle, whose remains were central to the town. Now, in 2022, we developed a heritage trail in Tralee through Tidy Towns, and a lot that again was funded by the Heritage Council, and much of that heritage trail features on parts of Castle Street. So it's really been this was another step in the story of Tralee, and we're very much looking now to the next thing. You can see here the process. I suppose once we had the funding approved and we had the architects appointed, the engagement began then. So we had a number of online meetings with Gareth O'Callaghan and his colleagues in JCA. They came to Tralee. They came down and spent a day in the town going around. You can see the guys here meeting let's go back there one, sorry, meeting the businesses, going in and out of the properties, getting a sense of, both inside and outside, the different types of architecture, the different types of, down to the sort of the architraves and the I can't even think of the word here now, forgive me, but the sort of the paneling and the plaster work and all that. So what we really wanted from the study, you can see here the key components: an architectural history, a full street elevation survey, and we wanted to get analysis of key building examples to make it relative and document photographically, obviously, as well. So you can see them here with John Ross Jewellers, and they're walking up as well. As part of the engagement process, there was that day in Tralee, and there was a few other days as well where they were meeting with the businesses and liaising and back and forth in contact. Now, to be fair, they carried the bulk of the work here. I mean, the committee, we were overseeing, we were guiding it, we were keeping connected, keeping our members updated, and it gave us something positive to talk about, as opposed to, have you paid your membership? Are you, what can we love? And it was a challenging year for business, so this gave us a really, really positive story to tell throughout the year and to keep businesses engaged. One of the highlights of it, I think, there were two particular events. This one here that you can see on the screen was a workshop that took place on the Bank of Ireland building in Castle Street, one of the main buildings in the street, beautiful old building. And that was very well attended. It was probably the first time as a chamber we'd managed to get that number of businesses from that area into an event. Such was the interest in it. And on that night, the drawings were presented and there was further information given. And it was on a Wednesday evening at 7:30, went on for 2 hours, it was a fantastic, I suppose, vote of confidence in the project and vote of confidence in the chamber and the belief in it. That's the actual Bank of Ireland building. The outside of it here you can see. So it is a beautiful building. It's right there in the middle of Castle Street. I suppose the key findings from the study, like if you look there, you can see the amount of decay. There's one building there at the top there. You can see the decay here, and like what are businesses going to do with that? How are they going to fix that? I mean, these are not small costs. These are not your typical building repairs. There's significant funding required and finance required to, bring these buildings back to the state they should be in. And of course, there's funding there, there's grants there, but a lot of these businesses, the majority they don't have the wherewithal or the time to go seeking this. So projects like this are really, really important because they actually make it so much more accessible. The information is there, it's presented to them. That night in Bank of Ireland, you can see just the chap here with the glasses from Kerry County Council, and Victoria, the conservation officer, she wasn't there the night, but she's there all the time. They're there to provide the information and the advice, but people don't always realise they're there. They don't know where they are. And as well, the chamber itself, we can give that information. One key finding that came out of the study, though, is that the overheads, the first and second floors of these properties are not utilised at all, and there's huge opportunity to get funding to actually, put accommodation. Of course, what we all want to see in our town centres, we want a vibrant town centre, we want thriving, we want businesses, and ideally you want businesses on your ground floors, and you want accommodation upstairs, and that's what creates a community. It's people living in the town centre. So then as well, there was examples here of, creative thinking, like going along with the accommodation on the upper floors. It's, what would work, if you're in Tralee Town Centre. Tralee is a university town. We have MTU, we also have Kerry UTB as well. There's a constant influx of students into our town. There's always issues with accommodation. There's huge opportunity for Tralee Town Centre to become an accommodation hub for these people coming and studying into the town. Apprenticeships as well. We have a huge number of apprenticeships taking place throughout the year. There's a year-round intake in Kerry College. So that was a key finding as well. I suppose recommendations for local authorities, and it's not my place here, but I would say that, Kerry County Council has always been a very forward-thinking local authority. There's been huge work done in the town over the years. There's further plans. So this would be a recommendation for general, but I can say with confidence the Kerry County Council are very committed to maximising the opportunities in Tralee Town Centre and have carried out fantastic work over the years. This is a sort of building case study for you here. The Blasket is actually directly across from the Bank of Ireland building. And you can see here exactly what it is. It's a building form. It's mid-terrace, 3 bay, 3 story. And the reason I'm showing you this in the presentation is that every building on Castle Street got this level of detail presented to them in the final report, and it just shows the detail that went into the project. There's quite a lot of buildings in Castle Street going all the ways up and down, and this project delivered detailed information on every building on that street, which was available to the owners, and also something that can be used for future studies and future projects. One of our favourite parts of the project was this unexpected surprise. But during Heritage Week in August, we ran an event in Jess McCarthy's, which is a pub on Castle Street, a very old bar. It was in operation for over 100 years. And you can see here, this chap here is Justin McCarthy, and he is the nephew of Jess. But this evening we decided what we would do in a very informal way, not so much into the nitty-gritty of the project and the buildings, but actually we'd have an evening where people that had lived in the street or people that had done business in the street, who may or may still be there or may not be there, but everybody was invited to come in and tell their stories about Castle Street through the ages. Mike O'Donnell down here on the left is a local storyteller and history enthusiast, and he entertained everybody so well. And people that hadn't met for a long time. Now, it was August, it was Heritage Week. It was absolutely probably the wettest night of the summer. There was torrential rain, and it was so full. We had people standing outside with umbrellas outside the bar. Such was the interest. And, as a chamber, we run events on a fortnightly basis, really. We do workshops on, business supports, on all sorts of things, tourism, everything. But I've never seen in the 3.5 years in my role as CEO such an interest in an event and such a desire to come in and connect. And people that connected that night have stayed in touch they hadn't met for years. And if you can do something like that in your community, that's huge. And it wouldn't have happened without this project. So I'm going to finish off with this now. And as I said, my presentation is very much from the community side of things, from the element of bringing people together and what it means. This is the All-Ireland winning ladies Kerry football team at the top of Castle Street for their homecoming during the Féile Trolley last August. The street was, you can't see it from this picture, but the street, there were thousands on it, all there to welcome home the Kerry ladies. Down here you can see local voluntary commit. This is one of our Tidy Towns results. We've done very well in the last 2 years. We've come up 36 points in 2 years in the National Tidy Towns competition, and these are chamber, local authority, volunteers, everyone together. What Tralee has, and what projects like this contribute to, is a really strong and vibrant community. And the more we can do to enhance our town centres, the more we can do to bring people with us and to bring groups together, the better it is for our towns. And an awful lot of it is, there's challenges everywhere. Tralee is a county town. We have our share of our antisocial behaviour and our challenges, but we have to just keep driving the positives and keep driving, enhancing what we have, building on it, and really the people make it, and we can all do very well for our towns if we do collaborating and working together. And that's me, really. I hope that's okay. I hope I saved you a bit of time. So I think I'm handing over to Raymond next.
Not so fast, Colette. Thank you very much. That was brilliant. Now we have a question for you.
Okay.
From Aisling. Thanks, Colette, for the PowerPoint. How did the Chamber get support buy-in from business traders prior to project initiation? And how was it maintained throughout the project? What challenges were there, if any, in getting businesses involved?
I suppose what we did really, and there's no two ways about it, Kevin McCarthy and myself, and as I said, Kevin was the former president of the Chamber. He's also former president of the Rose of Tralee and Golf Club. He's very well known as managing director of Garvey Group. And passionate about Tralee, absolutely passionate about Tralee, as am I, and our committee, basically, and Aidan Turner, and we knocked on doors. We went in and out of business. We set aside a day every couple of weeks where we would start at the top of the street. We would keep going back. There was many a Saturday where, I went into Tralee. I don't live in the area. to meet people if I missed them the first time. And that was the way we did it. We just kept going in, kept going back to them. There's a fair amount of just, yeah, it's pounding the streets, and they don't always want to hear, you know, as I said in the presentation, people are very bogged down at the moment in business. It's very challenging, very, very challenging. But projects like this, they can seem like in the beginning you kind of think, well, really, is it going to make much of a difference? But it's always worth doing, always. And what this project will do for us, I think, is actually going to even be more valuable in the future than even it has been. But as I said, that particular event last August, we'll run that again next year. You know, even though the project is over, we'll run that again next year. We'll run that every year now. We'll bring these people back into Castle Street every year, and we'll do a different kind of social evening. And that in itself creates goodwill. So I suppose it's a case of just and I must say as well, I'm on a paid role, but everybody else on that committee was voluntary. So volunteers are a huge part of it.
So pounding the street is the answer. Just making those connections. And then a comment from Sean O'Hargan. Morning, Sean. He just saying great to see Jess McCarthy's featuring one of his favourite pubs in Ireland.
Oh well, great. I'll tell that to Justin.
Okay, thank you, Colette. That was brilliant. And then just like Monaghan, also truly, we'd love to see more grant applications to actually carry out works. And talk to Victoria. We know we know you are already in the county council. So thank you. Our next speaker then, Raymond, are you there?
I am, Ian. Good morning. How are you?
Okay, if you want to get set up. Our next speaker is Raymond Higgins, architect with Cork County Council. And Raymond is going to tell us about Passage West, County Cork, where they did a heritage regeneration plan last year. And I think you're also going to mention the library in Midleton, which we've also been discussing and working on, and which hopefully will get started this year. So over to you, Raymond, please.
Thank you, Ian. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you, everyone. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to you today about a couple of the projects that we've been delivering here in Cork over the past year for the Historic Towns Initiative 2024. As Ian said, I'm an architect here, a senior executive architect with Cork County Council and an RIAI Grade 2 conservation architect as well. With my team in the architects department, I'm working closely with the heritage team and the conservation officers, plus library services and municipal districts. We have two projects under the 2024 path of projects. We have done a few projects now in Cork under this heritage funding. We've started off with Youghal. We've then moved to Macroom. Last year, we did a project in Bantry, and then we've added Passage West and Midleton to the catalogue this year. I suppose the projects have kind of worked around heritage-led regeneration plans, but also full-on conservation projects as well. The first project I want to talk to you today about is Midleton Library. This was a project that we submitted for priority external conservation works. The Midleton Library, it's a protected structure. It's in an area of architectural conservation. It's a national monument, and it's also a national inventory of architectural heritage. It's located in the centre of Midleton town. And for those that don't know, Midleton is in the southeast region of Cork County. It's about 16 kilometres from Cork City, and it would be a satellite town really of Cork City, metropolitan of the wider Cork area. The building itself, it's a former market house, which would have been really critical to Ireland's civic and social history. Market houses served as centres for trade, politics, but also meeting places. And the building was purchased in 1996 as a library and continues to be a busy hub for students, families and older people in the town. Unfortunately, part of the building is derelict and unused just because of the condition of it. So really it is the ground floor only that is used as the library. So these works will really help try and create a long-term use of the full building. The project was all about external conservation works, and it was preservation really of the building. We got 350,000 funding for this project, and part of them works included the full restoration of the cupola at the top. It had suffered over the years from storm damage. It was some emergency works were to stabilize it, were completed in 2021, and this will allow the full restoration of that cupola, the clock, the bell, the weather vane. It will also look at the replacement of the roof, making sure that it's all working with the slates, the LED flashings, conservation of the cast iron finials, and also the rainwater goods. And on the facade itself, we'll be looking to restore the doors and the windows, and also looking at conservation repairs to the facades, including sand cement render to the parapet to be removed, repointing, full cleaning, and reinstatement of the lime render, which would have been originally on the upper floor. Internally on the first floor, we have a wonderful large open space, but the ceiling and the plasterwork there has delaminated. So we want to just restrain that for now back up to the structure, just to make sure that it doesn't dislodge and fall away and lose that conservation important element. We also, part of the project will be a lot of scaffolding and protection works because it's on a busy thoroughfare. We did try to get this project completed within 2024, but unfortunately, we had to retender the project. We went through a full procurement and we didn't get a contractor that we could make a recommendation to, so we've had to retender, and thankfully we've got an extension now from the Heritage Council for the funding into 2025. And the programme that we have here is that I suppose we applied in January. It is a very quick time frame. We got our approval early March, appointed our design team in April, mobilised quickly, prepared our tender documents, submitted our ministerial consent, which we would require in June, and then started in July, got our ministerial consent in September. So if everything had gone to plan, we would have been on site in September. Unfortunately, now we're looking to start on site in April. We think it's better to start after the winter weather has done. So we'll be appointing our contractor now in the next month or so, and then the construction works will go through the summer with completion in October. With all heritage projects for this funding, you do have to have a heritage event, and we had one on the 21st of August. It was a talk by Tony Harper on the history of Midleton and the market house and the importance of it as a key building in the street, and it was very popular and a real kind of a highlight for the whole project, really. And this is just kind of what the building looks like now as end of 2024, and just a visualization of what the project will look like once these priority conservation works will be complete later this year. So we're very thankful to the Heritage Council for the funding to allow this to happen. It would really transform the building in Midleton. Moving on then to the second project, and this is Passage West, and this was a heritage-led regeneration plan. And I suppose when we talk about regeneration, it's the process really of bringing social, cultural, economic and environmental life back into an area. And the Torrix Downs initiative really allows us to kind of focus in on heritage-led regeneration with this funding of a plan. So Passage West, it's really a coastal town. It's located in the heart of Cork Harbour. It's 10 kilometres southeast of the city. So it really is a satellite town of the Cork. It connects the kind of areas of Glenbrook, Monkstown and Passage West in a linear formation along the coast. The Passage West really is similar to other towns. However, it does have its connection with the harbour and a special area of protection, which really adds something special to it. The town occupies an attractive setting with the water. However, I suppose it has suffered from poor urban environment, including significant vacancy, dereliction, car dominance like many of our towns, and a lack of connection really to the waterfront. It is, sorry, I've gone the wrong way, apologies. It has a well-defined urban structure. However, this has kind of been lost or weakened really in the last few years, especially when a lot of the kind of important industries that would have been in the town disappeared. There's many areas that are derelict. This is an old convent site. It's underused. There is the Royal Victoria Dockland. That's currently kind of underutilized as well. It's used as a steel scrapyard right in the center of the town. And we've got a lot of vacant buildings, dereliction, old Dockland Terrace here in the middle of the town, all vacant. It has potential. It has huge potential, really, as a significant proximity to Cork City. It has an internationally renowned wildlife habitat. Its natural environment, including the parks, the greenways, all act as an important amenity for the residents of the area. And it brings a lot of people out of the city to explore that. And it's been really popular, the Greenway. It has a huge, strong community spirit, and that's the most important thing with any town. And there's several groups in Passage West that are really pushing the social and cultural fabric of the town, and that's really great to see. One of these would be the Passage West Maritime Museum. This has a significant impact on telling the story of Passage West, its maritime history. So the application, we submitted it in February. We looked for financial support to help us create a plan for Passage West, look at what was the dereliction, look at how we could address that, how we could find opportunities to make Passage West more attractive, more vibrant, and give a sense of pride back to that wonderful community that is there. We got awarded 50,000 towards the project, and that was allow us to appoint a multidisciplinary heritage team. With this grant, 80% is a heritage grant funding and 20% must come from Cork County Council funds. So the timeline there was quite strict as well. We, got our funding in early March. We got our consultant brief pulled together quite quickly within about 3-4 weeks from that grant. We publicly tendered it on e-tenders. We got our tenders returned in May, appointed the consultants in June, and got going really then in June till November developing the plan. And we had our public engagement workshop and event on the 20th of August. So we appointed Studio Maiko, as the consultants, multidisciplinary consultants, to deliver this plan with us. And they were excellent. They had lots of different skills, from planning to heritage conservation, and really worked and understood the brief and what we were trying to get out. So we couldn't have done this really without them. They were fantastic. We had established a steering group within Cork County Council. We then conducted interviews with that steering group and kind of got the feedback that was critical to making sure the plan worked for everybody. We had a public engagement event, brought the public in, got all the different community groups involved. And then we had a co-creation workshop on the 20th of August, really trying to work together to try and put together what was the action plans that could be looked at for the town. This public engagement event there, just some images of it. So with the report, it's about understanding what are the key issues and what needs to be identified as how we can put a path in place to address them. We need to look at all the policy and regeneration context that is out there already. And then we need to look at potential projects and where potential funding or how long they would take to realise. So we adapted the double diamond approach, which is the discover, define and develop, which really works really well in terms of getting a successful plan put together. Just going back in terms of its heritage, it started off as a fishing village, a very small little town, but became a very important and nationally important shipbuilding centre, even in Europe. And also back in the day, would have been a very important holiday resort for the wealthy. But 100 years, the town has suffered and dereliction has set in. And it really, if we map out all the history of the town, and we kind of call it the Maritime Mile in terms of the history, and it's a really interesting concept that we'll continue through this presentation. You can see the boom that was of the 19th century, the shipbuilding, Royal Albert Dry Dock, the Glenbrook Pier, even the Glenbrook Baths, which were all part of the tourist explanation. And, where that shipbuilding came, it was really a growth for the town. But, even 300 people were employed in the centre of Passage West in shipbuilding in its peak. And then, the holiday resort that I spoke about as well. So also critical to Passage West's expansion and importance was the railway's connection to, Ringaskiddy and onto the Cork City. So when these railway closed, when the docklands or the shipbuilding stopped, a lot of these key buildings became derelict, and even the onset of World War One, infrastructure really suffered in the town. So that's where the decline started, and a lot of the key things disappeared, which really results in what we have today. When we talk about the built heritage, it reflects its maritime past. It mirrors its industrial growth. The main thoroughfare is flanked basically by historic buildings. There is, a rich history connected with them. The linear formation really along the coast is basically part of what makes Passage West as a defined town. The main facades provide really the space for the people to meet and greet within the space of the town. And there's a lot of homes and residential spaces built on elevated areas looking over the river, and these would have been Georgian terraces and some beautiful types of building, residential buildings. But similar to maybe even Tralee, it's the importance of the architectural elements of these buildings, the sash windows, the brick chimneys, the limestone connections, that they're all the backbone of the town's character. So that's really important to map them out and make sure that we look after it. As in terms of the old convent site here, you can see the importance of that, its architecture and its style, that presence within the town. And these craftsmanship that goes into basically the buildings. So when we look at an audit for the town, we look at these 5 key things: its movement and connections, public realm, land use, the economy, social, community and cultural elements, and the built form. And we analysed all of these, and like similar to other towns probably, coming out was vehicular dominance, busy thoroughfares, the disconnect really between the Glenbrook, which is the ferry crossing to Cove, and the town centre, barriers really between the town and the waterfront. When we look at public realm, there was a lack of consistency in the overall vision for the town. There was the valuable green spaces could be even further enhanced, and the town square really wasn't, or space for really to meet and greet wasn't fully utilised as it could be. Overall, vacancy and dereliction was something we were aware of, but it did come out very strongly when we did this audit. Lack of real cafes and restaurants, limited tourist accommodation. Tourism had really disappeared. Industrial influence on the waterfront really impacting the ability for the town to grow. Opportunities for community hubs, they're all on the outskirts of Passage West, nothing really in the town centre. Over-reliance on the library building to act as a one building that hits everything for the town, but such a small little building, it cannot really utilise that. And also just, I suppose, looking at the built form, where we've lost a lot of them architectural heritage, where windows and doors are all being replaced with non-sensitive replacements, inappropriate, I suppose, interventions into the historic fabric. And we got a lot of stakeholder feedback as well from various things, but with huge potential, and everybody seeing Passage West as an opportunity that really could transform into a place that we wanted it to be. So we tried to identify the opportunities into short-term, medium and long-term goals. So the short-term were the quick wins, something that could change, that easily change, that would make a difference. And then the long-term projects are more long-term projects that we could identify, that we could utilise and seek funding as and when the funding opportunities arise. So we wanted to make it attractive, vibrant and connected, and these are the 3 themes that really pull the plan together. So when we look at an action plan for making it more attractive, themes that came out was a design guide to communicate to the residents on how they can upgrade their building, similar to Castle Street, what's important about their building and what they should be doing when a project wants to happen there. Looking at the gateways in and out of the town, looking at the lighting across the town to make it more warmer and welcoming to people and to the people that live there. and looking at a consistent palette of materials when we're looking at interventions into the public realm. There's other elements around, the wildlife and, bird nesting and ecology elements that are very important as well that would help this action plan. When we look about vibrancy, it's about getting people into the town and getting opportunities for people to meet and greet, really get together and chat. So these are events, it could be arts programs, it could be parklets program, social seating, shop front refurbishment, visitor accommodation, play spaces. So these are all mapped out within the plan and where we could have quick wins and where we should be looking at opportunities as we move forward. And then a connected town. This is about connecting that history of what was so important about Passage West with the new elements of Passage West today, and connecting the cycle greenway from Cork City, improving visibility to the water and just telling that story. We did identify 6 key sites. These sites, if developed, would be transformational for the town. And one of these is the old Catholic Young Men's Society Hall, which is a community hub, or was a community hub, and that would be a very important heritage building to bring back into community use. So that's a priority, I think, from this plan that would really instantly transform the town centre core. Looking at the quays, I think we have to try and find opportunities to utilise these more, and rather than the town turning its back on the water in the town centre, we now open this up and allow the town to look out into the water and allow people to utilise that space. The convent site, there's been huge frustration at the lack of movement on this site. It's a huge site in the middle of the town. Maybe we can look at some meanwhile use here just to try and test some of the opportunities that were arose through the consultation with the public. Looking at the town centre block, the square, if you like, and the dominance of the cars here, how we could prioritize pedestrian movement, spaces for people to meet and greet, and just allow the businesses and retail opportunities to flourish really in the town centre. And then addressing the gateway from into the town as we arrive from Glenbrook, from Monkstown, from the Ringaskiddy side, if you like, and where we have a load of dereliction, maybe working with the stakeholders here to try and get these operational and open and utilised again, and opening up the sense of arrival point into the town. And the library itself, really seeing if we can maximise more potential for the library, for the Maritime Museum that's adjacent, and try and give it more space to perform really to the best of its ability for the people of the town. And then going back to the Maritime Mile, if we connected the history of the town with these new interventions along the town, it would really celebrate Passage West, and it would allow people to explore the town and its heritage, and really tie the whole thing together, which we think is really exciting, and a simple idea that would work effectively. The total cost of the project was just short of 40,000, was just short of 50,000, with 38,000 given from the Heritage Council, and around 10,000 by Cork County Council. The final word just for me is just to say this plan has been excellent. It really identified the opportunities for us in Passage West, and we think it's extraordinary in terms of what the consultants have done to meet the brief, and we're really excited about it. The fact that the public have come involved and the community groups have helped write this plan, it's really the plan for the people, written by the people, and that is instrumental in terms of bringing projects forward. And we're extremely grateful to the Heritage Council for this funding and what it would mean, because Cork is a big county and you're competing against lots of other towns just to even try and get any piece of funding. So having this plan now, it gives us a stepping stone to actually make Passage West come to life again. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time, and it's been lovely to speak to you this morning.
Thank you, Raymond. Just checking questions. Okay. I'll have a closer read of that during the break, and we'll come back on it. Raymond, that was brilliant. We're really looking forward to seeing Midleton, the library, this year, getting across the line, and we were delighted to see the works in Division for Passage West, and we look forward to further applications there. I think we'll take a short break. We're a little bit behind, but if we take maybe a 5-minute break, and the risk then is that we lose some of you. But if you do come back, and I really hope you will, at say 11:05, you're in for a treat. You will learn about a town in Donegal called Glenties. You'll learn a lot about Brian Friel and Dermot Gavin, the gardener. He might even get mentioned as well. That'll be with Joe Gallagher and Colette Beattie of Donegal County Council. So if you want to grab a cup of coffee, and we'll come back at 11:05. Okay, so thank you for listening, and thank you to all of our speakers. Okay, are we back? Are you there, Joe and Colette?
Yes, indeed, we are. Thank you, Ian.
Okay. So welcome back, everybody. As I mentioned, we're off to Glentees now in Donegal to hear from Joe Gallagher and Colette Beattie. Joe is the Heritage Officer and Colette is the Conservation Officer. And they're going to tell us about the Glentees Historic Town Initiative, Real and Imagined Public Realm.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. As Ian said, I'm here with my colleague Colette Beattie to tell you a little bit about our Historic Towns Initiative in Glentees in County Donegal. We're going to kind of, in terms of our presentation, just set out the policy and funding context for our work, and then talk a little bit about the heritage-led and conservation-led approaches that we took to it. We'll give you a brief introduction to Glentees and to our Historic Towns Initiative, and then give you an overview of the conservation works. And finally, we'll conclude with the lessons learned. In terms of the Historic Towns Initiative, as you know, the local authority must make applications under the scheme itself. So in our case, Donegal County Council made that application. The town needs to possess significant cultural and heritage assets and have a distinctive sense of place. And again, I think we were able to demonstrate that for Glentees, as you'll see. It was very important that we adopted a conservation plan-led and heritage-led regeneration approach, and you'll see that in our presentation. Strong community engagement is really important in terms of your application, and one of the ways that we demonstrated that was letters of support to support our application. So we spent a lot of time speaking to local community groups, telling them about what we've got planned, working with our local partners to garner that local support, and also to let them know what was happening. And you'll also see the match funding requirement and how we address that in our project. In terms of policy context, there's a whole variety of policies out there. And I think it's really important to set your work within those policy contexts. You know, whether it's the Heritage Council Strategic Plan, the new National Heritage Plan, whether it's policies in relation to housing and climate, also our County Heritage Plan and a County Development Plan. There are policies, there are strategies that can outline some of the objectives that we're trying to reach. So that helps justify to the approach that we're taking. As we know as well, there's a whole plethora of sources of funding as well for the conservation and regeneration of our built heritage. The Historic Towns Initiative, I think, is one of the few sources that's very focused on the heritage, on the conservation of the heritage, and taking a conservation-led approach and a heritage-led approach. Some of the other sources of funding that are there are perhaps geared towards other agendas. So I think in terms of the Historic Towns Initiative, I think its focus on heritage and conservation is really important in terms of guiding principles. The village that that was the subject of our Historic Towns Initiative, Glentees. Some of you might know it as the National Tidy Towns Competition winner. It was the first winner of the Tidy Towns competition in 1958. It won it again in 59 and 60, again in 62, and most recently in 1995. And it is the town that has won the Tidy Towns competition the most times nationally. But Glentees is a small market town in West Donegal. Here you can see an image from the Lawrence collection from around about the 1900s on a fair day. And again, it serves a large rural hinterland. One of the businesses as well that was in town was cottage industry around the wool and knitting industry. There was people who would knit in their homes, and that would be gathered by agents in the town itself, or people would bring their goods to the agents in the town initially. And then by the mid-20th century, the agents would go out and gather the woolen goods from the various households. And that was a very important cottage industry, really up until the 1980s. It was supported as well by Údarás na Gaeltachta because it's based in the Gaeltacht region. And here you can see the main street in Glentees, which is set out along a single street, as indeed many small villages in West Donegal are. That's the morphology of the town. And again, Glenties today here with the Highlands Hotel. Those of you who may have visited Glenties may very well have stayed in the Highlands Hotel. But Glenties is also known for its annual Harvest Fair, which takes place on the 12th of September every year. And there's a whole festival now, a 3 to 4 day festival that is built up around that event. And here you can see the main street closed off and the stalls lined on either side of the main street. Glenties is also home to Patrick McGill. Patrick McGill was a journalist and poet and novelist. He wrote novels like Children of the Dead End and The Rat Pit, which spoke about the experience of Irish labourers in Britain. And there is now the McGill Summer School named in his honour, which takes place in July, August time. And it's a veritable who's who in terms of Irish and international politics. He was called the navvy poet, again, navvy referring to the labourers who worked in Britain in terms of construction. Glenties is also home to St. Connell's Church, one of 7 churches designed by the Derry architect Liam McCormick. Liam McCormick might be better known to many of you as the designer of St. Angus's Church in Burt in East Donegal, as it was voted the building of the millennium in 2000. But it's Brian Friel, the playwright and author, that was really the inspiration for our Historic Towns initiative. Brian was born in County Tyrone. He worked in Derry as a teacher before moving to Greencastle in County Donegal, where he raised his family. But it's to Glenties that he has a special affection. As he says himself, when I was a boy, we spent a portion of our summer holidays in my mother's old home near the village of Glenties in County Donegal. I have memories of those days that are as pellucid, as intense as if they happened last week. I remember in detail the shape of the cups hanging in the scullery, the pattern of flags on the kitchen floor, every knot of wood on the wooden stairway, every door handle, every smell, the shape and texture of every tree around the place. And that's taken from his self-portrait in 1971. So Glenties was clearly a very important place for him. And 13 of his plays are set in Ballybeg. And by his own admission and by the assessment of many others, Ballybeg is largely based on the village of Glenties. And you can see one of his best-known plays there, Dancing at Lunasa, written in 1990, which was also made into a film starring Meryl Streep in the mid-1990s. So 13 of those plays set in Ballybeg. And Brian himself sadly passed away in October of 2015, and he's buried in his beloved Glenties in the new graveyard in Glenties. Indeed, on the day of his funeral, the people of Glenties renamed the town Ballybeg in his honour. And if you take a walk around town now, you can see his influence as well in terms of the naming of businesses. The Laurels Ballroom in the Highlands Hotel, the Laurels takes its name from Brian Friel's mother's home, which you'll hear more about in just a few moments. And then the Lunasa Creative Arts Centre and Shoppa Lunasa, obviously related to his play Dancing at Lunasa. In the same graveyard where Brian is buried, his uncle Barney McClune is also buried. Barney was a missionary priest who spent time in Uganda, and it's believed that the character of Father Jack in Dancing at Lunasa is largely based on his uncle. A little bit further out the road in the old graveyard in Drumnasilla, there is a mausoleum, and in that mausoleum there is a plaque to the McClune family of the Laurels and Glenties in loving memory. And it is to the Laurels that we go. The Laurels was Brian Friel's mother's home in Glenties. This is where his aunts lived as well. And the Monday sisters who are portrayed in Dancing at Lunasa are largely believed to be based on the McClune sisters who grew up here in the Laurels. The Laurels was also known as Railway View, and the building itself was added to the Record of Protected Structures in 2017. The building was acquired by the Brian Friel Trust, our partners in the project, in 2016. And the building, as you can see, is of national significance and of architectural, social, and cultural value. Why was it called railway view originally? Well, literally across the road from the Laurels was the narrow gauge railway terminus. And you can see the station house there in the background, hidden by the trees. Also the water tower here, and there's also goods sheds as well on site. So Brian, when he would come to Glenties to visit his aunts, he would take the narrow gauge railway to Glenties and literally walk across the road to the Laurels. Donegal County Council commissioned a conservation report on the Laurels in 2017 that was updated in 2024. The Brian Friel Trust commissioned a feasibility study for a Brian Friel Centre, which is to be based in the old courthouse in Glenties, which was also one of the subject buildings in our Historic Towns initiative. And here you can see sort of an illustration by John McLaughlin Architects showing the courthouse here in the foreground, which will be the venue for the Brian Friel Centre. Next door to it is Connell's Museum, which was also one of the buildings that was the subject of our Historic Towns initiative. Across the road here is St. Connell's Church, which was also another building that was in our Historic Towns initiative. And right here, you pass in up along the main street, right around to the other end of town, and you can see in this cluster of trees here, cluster of laurel trees, is the building, the Laurels, which is Brian Friel's mother's home in Glenties. We undertook a topographic level survey of the Laurel site as well in 2023, which we felt was important in terms of addressing the site considerations for the building, the historic building of the Laurels itself, which was here on the site. After the Brian Friel Trust acquired the building, we felt it was very important to document the objects in the building, some of which may have related to the time when Brian Friel visited the building as a child. So we commissioned Conservation Letter Frac to do a condition survey of the objects. As you can see, many of them were in a very poor condition because of years of deterioration and water ingress. But we felt it was really important to conserve some elements, such as the dresser here and also the trunk, which also have echoes from the play Dancing at Lunasa. We commissioned oral historian Dr. Tomas McConra to undertake recorded interviews with some people who would have memories of the Laurels, of life in the Laurels, and also of Brian Friel's experience of the Laurels. And we're also working with Dr. Brendan McSivnia from NUI Galway, who's writing a book on what has happened to this house. A quote again from Dancing at Lunasa, looking at the life of the McClune family and the Cannon family who lived in the Laurels. So tying in the local history with the material fabric of the building. We also, as part of our County Heritage Plan, commissioned an online exhibition entitled Brian Friel's Ballybeg. Again, linking the real and imagined places of Brian Friel's life experience and also of his literary works. As we said, Ballybeg is believed to be largely based on Glenties, but he also drew inspiration from other locations around Donegal. So we looked at the 13 plays that are based in Ballybeg, and we looked at where the inspiration came from those within the county. And we mapped those and we identified the sources of those. We gave an overview of Brian's life and of his work as well. And that website is now available online. The Brian Friel Trust have also created a website for the Brian Friel Centre to track progress in terms of establishing the centre and the conservation of the Laurels. One of your first tasks, I suppose, in any Historic Towns Initiative project is to establish your partnership team. And you can see there Colette as Conservation Officer and myself as Heritage Officer. Our colleague Joanne McMenamin as Administrative Officer. We're the partners from Donegal County Council. We worked with great partners in the Brian Friel Trust, and you can see the partners all listed there. And again, they were wonderful to work with in terms of discharging the funding, in terms of overseeing the work, in terms of coordinating all the different partners that were involved in the project. And then also our partners in Daedalus Architecture, who were commissioned by the Brian Friel Trust as the conservation architect for the project, Duncan McLaren. Another important step that we had to undergo was to identify property owners for the various properties. And again, just those of you who are considering an application, it's very important too sometimes that the lack of property registration in our towns and villages can be a barrier to addressing vacancy and dereliction. Prior to our application, we identified the properties that we wanted to be the subject of our application, so that we dealt with a lot of those issues early on in the process prior to our application. So the buildings that were the subject of our Historic Towns initiative were the Laurels, Brian Frield's mother's home in Glenties, dating from 1870, which was currently vacant. Glenties Courthouse, dating from 1841. The court service had moved out of it about a decade ago, and it was vacant, and that's going to be the site for the Brian Friel Centre. St. Connell's Museum, which is a community-run museum next door. It had closed prior to COVID, but had reopened again after COVID. It dates from 1991. And St. Connell's Church Gate, St. Connell's Church, as you heard earlier, dating from 1971, Liam McCormick designed church and entrance gate. So our budget for the project, we got 350,000 in funding from the Heritage Council. Donegal County Council was required, or our partners, and Donegal County Council were required to put in a minimum of 20% match funding. As you can see there, Donegal County Council put in 30% match funding of 150,000. And the Brian Friel Trust, again, put in many hours of work as well in terms of in-kind contribution. So we had a financial budget of 500,000. In terms of the discharge of that funding, we developed a legal agreement, as we do under our Historic Towns initiative, and you can see the first page of that legal agreement there. The legal agreement's important because it protects the interests of the local authority. It provides clarity as well to the project participants in terms of what they're getting out of the project in terms of works. It's all documented and detailed by the time the legal agreement is signed. It ensures compliance with all the grant conditions that are set down under the Historic Towns initiative. And it also confirms the match funding arrangements as well for the project, who's putting in what amount of money and what you're getting for that work. This is here at the signing of the legal agreement and the building contracts in the summer of last year, here with members of the Brian Friel Trust in the Highlands Hotel in Glenties. We also, as I said, the Brian Friel Trust commissioned Duncan McLaren, a grade 1 conservation architect there, pictured in the right of the image in the foreground. And then after we secured funding, we procured contractors for the project, Michael Gallagher and John Malloy, father and son from Glenties, local contractors for the project. And you can see some of the other project partners there from St. Connell's Museum and from the Brian Friel Trust in the foreground. The role of the conservation specialist in your project is really important as well. In this instance, the role of our conservation architect was to compile and tender 2 separate work packages and to draw up and negotiate 4 building contracts. He also acted as an umbrella consultant, overseeing a structural engineer and an ecologist for the project. There was renegotiation of the packages of work as well, because sometimes issues arise. There were structural issues, as you'll hear, in the Glenties Courthouse. The condition of the roof was much worse than we'd originally anticipated, and that had to be accounted for as well. There was preparation and submission of planning applications for a septic tank at the Laurels, for new signage to St. Connell's Museum, and for also changes to disabled access at St. Connell's Museum. So he overseen the work and worked closely with the 2 contractors, with the joiner and the 3 owners. And again, that regular communication was very important. And then there were site visits and certification of the works and documentation of the conservation works as well, which are a really important part of the process. I'm going to hand you over now to Colette, who will talk you through some of the works that were undertaken as part of the Historic Towns initiative.
Yeah, so I'll just start with the Laurels, and these photographs here that you can see were taken in 2016 when the Brian Friel Trust acquired the building, and you can see the extent of the water ingress and it affected timber that in one end they had completely collapsed through, and the other end you can see that they were very, very fragile. So these collections of photographs were really, really important because they could be used as evidence to put the building back together again. So this is the building here in 2000, the exterior of the building in 2016, and it's quite deceptive from this angle. It doesn't look too bad, but there's really large holes in the roof there, and that was creating the water ingress, and there was no rainwater goods. So the Brian Friel Trust, they set about roof repairs, re-roofing in 2018. And then in 2020, the Brian Friel Trust were successful under the Built Heritage Investment Scheme to complete the roof works and chimney works and to put back on the rainwater goods. So essentially that made the water, the building watertight again. The following year, the trusts were successful again under the Built Heritage Investment Scheme and also a bit of funding under the council's heritage plan. And this was for the windows. So they restored any windows that could be restored, and any that were beyond restoration, and they were repaired like for like. And the slide just shows an example of a before and after on the windows. So in terms of our HTA project, we identified a costed programme of conservation works in terms of the rest of the works to the laurels, some outbuildings, and the installation of a septic tank. And all the cost control and estimations were undertaken by the project architect as part of their service. So the original floor timbers were undersized and to ensure the new floors were fit for purpose. As part of our multidisciplinary team, we had a conservation engineer assist in the design in relation to the shallow depths and long spans to be achieved. And this photograph too, you can also see that the window reveals and the architraves are to be inserted in the next phase of works. And this photograph here shows the same room, the subfloor reinstated in the building. And again, it's ready to be serviced and a timber floor to be installed in the next phase of works. This photograph from 2016 shows the condition again of the building, and the doors and furniture were all salvaged where possible and were set aside for the reuse in the building. There were vinyl tiles on this particular room as well too, and we had a thought that there might be asbestos in them. So as part of the project, we got them tested, and it did confirm that there was asbestos in those tiles, and they had to be carefully removed by specialist contractors. So this is the same room again here. You can see how low the heights of the rooms were, just to where the plaster goes up. And you can also kind of see how thick the floors were. So this is the room when the first floor reinstated. The vinyl tiles carefully removed. And you can also see that the rotted timbers above the doorways were also replaced. So this is the half attic, the half level, sorry, the attic rooms. This shows all the floorboards put back. So we had new planks mulled from Douglas fir timber, and they were all to match the original sizes. So we used archaeology of the building to form the detail of putting back the stairs and the internal porchway. So you can kind of see there on the wall, just the level where the stairs went out, and you can see then on the floor the tiles area, and that gave, that kind of showed where the inner porch was. We also used historic photographs, and where we did salvage elements, we put them back as well too. So those works, the stairways and the porch, have been now inserted back into the building. So in terms of the external building, we kind of finished off all the external works, and we also put a drain around the building and also painted it. So this is a during photograph, and this is when the exterior works were completed. This is another photograph kind of showing the front elevation during the works. And this is the external works now completed. So as part of the project, we also restored the outbuildings on the site, and they're really simple structures, but a really important part of how the house operated. So just really gentle rehabilitation there. We just kind of repaired the roof. In terms of the after photograph, the doors and the window have now been reinstated into the building along with the rainwater goods. So one of the challenges that we had on the site was like organising large machinery on the site for installing a wastewater treatment system. So the entrance to the site was very narrow, and there was an avenue of laurel trees. So yeah, we were able to negotiate that pretty well without any major damage. So it was important to have the septic tank, the wastewater treatment system put in the building, yeah, for its future use. So this is a laurel from 2016 with the holes in the roof, and this is the work during the HCI project. And this is the exterior of the property now today with all the external works completed. So just moving on to the other building that we concentrated our efforts on was the Glenties Courthouse. And this is a landmark building along the main street. As Joe says, it was vacant for 10 years, and it will be in use as a Brian Field Centre and connected to the Laurels. So the Brian Field Trust CLG leased the Glenties Courthouse from Donegal County Council in 2024. So this was a picture of the courthouse just before we started the works. And the chimney you can see there was structurally unstable, and the other chimney was so unstable it was taken down previously. And the rainwater goods all needed overhauled. The windows were in very poor condition, and we thought there was natural slates on the roof, but once we got up in the scaffolding and inspected them closely, they were fibre cement slates that had reached the end of their life, and actually they needed to be completely replaced. So we had to kind of reorganise our project at that stage. So internal fittings of the courthouse are really interesting. It still has all its original courthouse furniture. And this slide kind of shows you the rear elevation of the courthouse. So in addition to the works I pointed out earlier, there was cement render on the rear elevation and on the gables that needed to be removed. So this is it when all cement render was picked off. And this photograph kind of shows the new lime render applied to the building. And the windows were in such poor condition, they all needed to be taken out of the building and taken to a workshop to be completely restored. So this photograph shows the scaffolding down, lime render drying out, and all the windows then reinstated back into the building after they were restored. And yeah, the rear elevation is looking really well. So in terms to get the right mix, the contractor used 3 different sources of aggregates, and they were all locally sourced. So as I mentioned there, the roof had to be completely replaced. So we used natural slates on new battens over the felt. And that's the photograph of the finished roofing works. So one of the issues that we came across at the very start of the project was when the contractor took away the lining and inside the property, the gable was really dangerous and leaning out. So as part of our multidisciplinary team, yeah, we had a conservation engineer design a methodology for repair. And this photograph shows some of the repairs that were carried out. And just above that wall then, then after they were carried out them repairs, they rebuilt the chimney like for like to match the other one. And that's an after photograph kind of showing the chimney rebuilt again. So as part of our project this year, we have carried out a bat and swift survey. So there was swifts in the rear of the courthouse. So we had to start works after the swifts left the building in September. And then we installed these swift boxes for the return. And there was also bats and the laurels. So we kind of worked carefully with our ecologists, just to kind of manage the package of work so we didn't disturb any of the bats or swifts. So in terms of rainwater goods, these are some of the original ones that we overhauled and painted, and they came up really well. In relation to the rainwater goods on the rest of the building, they were PVC in the gables in the rear and downpipes, and you can just see the damage that they were causing the building. So we reinstated metal rainwater goods and downpipes, and you can just see the quality of introducing the right materials back again into the building on the slide here. So the basement windows were in really poor repair, as were all the windows. So this is an example of before the restoration, and this is an example of after the windows were repaired. We worked with a really good joiner, a local joiner, and yeah, one of the highlights of our project was like the quality of his work. And this is a detail of the rear windows and the paint system. He just transformed the building with his work. Again, on the front elevation, all the front windows were taken out and restored. And what we found was that at one stage in the past, the building, the windows were painted this colour. So we decided to kind of put that colour back again. And again, this is a side elevation where the cement raider had to be picked off and an after photograph of the line render reinstated on the gable there. So we also painted the railings in the front of the building to kind of match in with our new colour scheme for the building. So that's an after photograph there. So that was the first photograph we showed you before we started the works. And this was a during photograph, which shows the windows being taken out in the workshop. The slates already there to be put back on the roof. And this is the after photograph. So you can see the difference that this has made to the building with the chimney, the other chimney being rebuilt, reslated, the windows. It's looking really, really well in the streetscape. And we've had a lot of positive feedback from the community. So this is the St. Connell's Museum, a community-run museum just right next to the courthouse. And we included this in our package because the two buildings will hopefully work well together in the future. And we wanted them to coordinate in terms of colour schemes. So we applied a new colour scheme to the building. So the buildings really work well and read well together. This is a during photograph because we are currently designing new signage for the museum. And also there's a plan application to ensure that the access is meets all standards. Sorry. So just finally, then across the road and the large, very beautiful gate for the Liam McCormick Church, that was also restored. So I'll just hand you back now to Joe for just the last few remaining slides of our presentation.
Thanks, Colette. As part of our Historic Towns initiative, originally we planned to introduce 2 road crossings as well, one at either end of town, one near the courthouse, the Brian Friel Centre, and also one at the other end of town near the Laurels. But in discussions with our roads colleagues in Donegal County Council and Transport Infrastructure Ireland, the roadside crossings had been upgraded a couple of years ago, and they felt that there might be sort of a risk in introducing new roadside crossings at those venues. So we decided to reallocate some of the funding that we had set aside for that. And one of those was to undertake a landscape management plan for the Laurels, because we felt the site of the Laurels really is very important. The building itself is a real gem in terms of its literary and historical associations, but also the setting of it is going to be one of the places that people were going to come and see. So we worked with Jeremy Gavin, gardener, and he designed the landscape management plan, which sets out a planting for the site and also a performance area. And we're in discussions with him at the moment and with the Brian Friel Trust in terms of how best to realise that. We also commissioned a Brian Friel walk, which would link the 2 buildings together, the Brian Friel Centre and the old courthouse, and also the Laurels, because they're based at either end of town. We felt it was really important to have that linkage. So having a trail that linked the Laurels with the Brian Friel Centre. And as people come along, there's various stopping points proposed along that trail in conjunction with the local community that tell the story of Brian Friel's experience of Glenties. It tells also this imaginary place of Ballybeg, and also the literary works that are based on Glenties as well. So again, using audio-visual materials, augmented reality and virtual reality, hopefully that can be realized. The pathway to payment was really important as well in terms of how we discharged the funding. The works were certified by a conservation architect. Invoices were issued by the building contractors to the owners. On-site visit and works were verified by Colette as Conservation Officer and myself as Heritage Officer. The bills then were subsequently submitted to the Brian Friel Trust to Donegal County Council for funding. And we released partial payment then to the Brian Friel Trust, who subsequently paid the building contractors. Now, you might say, why did we take this pathway to payment? Well, we felt it was really important to remove the need for participants in the scheme to take out bridging loans, which would be an additional cost to them. So this was a way of ensuring that the works met the standards that were required, that Donegal County Council could draw down the funding under the Historic Towns Initiative, but at the same time still discharge the funding in a manner which facilitated the participants in the scheme. It's really important to start your project as well as soon as possible, because particularly if you're working within a 1-year time frame, the time period is very tight. March, you get approval for your scheme and the funding has to be drawn down by November. So effectively the works have to be finished by the end of October. So it is really quite a tight time frame that you're operating within. So the more work that you can get done prior to application, the better. As I said, we identified the projects and our participants prior to our application. We got letters of support and we were able to initiate a lot of the work early on by front-loading the scheme. So this is a view of the laurels here, just a reminder that there's lots of work done, but there's still more to do in future phases of the works here. And you can see there just along sort of the downpipe, one of the things that's missing there is the barrel, which would have been placed there initially. So again, in the future phase of works, that's something that has to be reinstated. So what have we learned from our Historic Towns Initiative that might be of use to you? Again, the heritage-led approach to regeneration, as I mentioned, is more than just using historic buildings as vehicles for regeneration. It's really about the philosophy behind it. It's repairing rather than replacing. And where you have to replace, that you replace, as Colette said, like with like. It's also about minimum intervention and also about climate change considerations. So it's not just because you're dealing with just because you use a historic building for regeneration. It's really important that the approach is heritage-led as well. Strong community engagement is very important. It requires time, effort, trust, and regular communication between the partners. The streamlining of funding is very important. And again, I think through our pathway to payment and through our legal agreement, we were able to reduce the financial burden on our local partners in the project. Coordination and innovation is needed between national and local service providers, whether that's the planning authority, whether it's, if it's road closures that are required, and liaison with our road section, really important. Also ESB as well, in terms of works that they may need to do in order to render the buildings safe for as working sites. Early engagement is really important there. There still remains very high expectations on voluntary community efforts, not just in the Historic Towns Initiative, but in terms of many grant schemes that are out there. And again, I would just like to pay tribute to the Brian Friedel Trust as partners in our project. They were wonderful to work with, as indeed were all the owners of all the properties, St. Connell's Museum and also the St. Connell's Church. The Historic Towns Initiative provides opportunities for employment, for training, and for engagement at a local level as well. And it also has the capacity to address housing and climate emergencies, which of course are at the core of many of these schemes. The final word, we'd just like to say a word of thanks to the Heritage Council and to the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage for funding the Historic Towns Initiative. And we look forward to the realisation of the Brian Friedel Centre in the old courthouse in Glenties, and also the conservation of the laurels in future phases of our real and imagined public realm in Glenties. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Colette. Okay, I see a couple of questions which I'll cover in the slides I'm going to do with Amanda now. But I think that's a brilliant project, and I think in the Heritage Council we're all really looking forward to seeing Glenties up and running and seeing that project reach its final destination. It'll be hugely transformative for Glenties. So thanks, Joe. Thanks, Colette. So now we're into our last session, our presentation, and that's where I'll just give an overview of the scheme for 2025 and I'll be joined by my colleague Amanda Ryan, the Heritage Council Grants Officer, and she'll just give some pointers on the applications and on the online system. So I'm just going to upload the presentation now. There we go. Okay, so you should be able to see that, and it might even be moving. I'm just going to talk about the workings of this scheme and how we operate it. So the scheme, as you've probably garnered from what you've heard so far this morning, or from your prior involvement in it, we've been running it since 2018 in the Heritage Council. It's about providing support to historic towns engaged in a programme of heritage-led regeneration. This year we've 2 million available for this. The key piece of information is the deadline is Friday the 14th of February, so Valentine's Day, 5 p.m. One of the other projects we funded in 2024 was in Ballina. We've done quite a bit of work in partnership with Mayo County Council, in particular the conservation officer there, Siobhan Sexton. She couldn't make it today, but this is the former guard station in Wall Street in the town centre in the Pearse Street Architectural Conservation area. What is it, 1, 2, 3, 4 properties, looking fairly tired, and that was it after Siobhan's work on it this year. It's now back in local authority ownership, and I suppose the reason I show this is to show one of the other projects we did this year. She also did some other works in Ballina, but I think this was the standout series of images. But also just to make the point, and we make this point whenever we're talking to, say, the town centre first officers, is regenerating a town can be a long process. It's hard work. It's about pounding the pavement, as Colette said earlier. But the results from works on terraces, on structures like this, do give a town and a street and a place an amazing shot in the arm. And they are, okay, there's work in them, but they are relatively short to medium term. So it's a really important signal of confidence. So Mayo County Council is working on finding a use for the interior of these next. So in 2025, plan is to support a small number of towns. Make your application to be assessed by a steering group made up of the Heritage Council, Fáilte Ireland, the Department, Built Heritage Service, and external person as well. We typically give priority to applications that are plan-led. So if you've gone to the trouble of investing in a conservation plan, a management plan, a regeneration plan, public ground, whatever, might be eligible actions from a town centre first plan. It's a great start. I think funding bodies like to see plans. It just gives a sense of an overview of a place being looked at in the round. Now that said, it's not a showstopper if you don't have them. If we see a good project which is well thought out and well structured, we do fund that too. Now, this is a change in 2025. Over the last number of years, we had a cap on applications from local authorities of 1 project per stream. We've removed that. So if you have the capacity and you think the projects are good enough, put them in. So we expect you, and again, you would have seen this morning, we expect local authorities to work with a range of partners. What's the best way of showing partnerships? Letters of support. It might be from building owners, it might be from tidy towns, it might be the local chamber, it might be from voluntary organisations, just to show that this project has been thought out and there's a good level of support and interest in it, that it means something. For capital projects, that's stream 1, anything up to 350,000 euro in term, depending on the projects proposed. So reflect the scale of likely funding available and achievable within the funding timeframe, i.e. in 2025. And again, you would have seen it this morning, strong public engagement, Heritage Week. And Heritage Week is it's just a great vehicle for bringing people together. And I think some of the projects today, particularly in Tralee, you see the level of interest in that. Good heritage projects are like glue, they just bring people together. This is a question we often get. Is our town eligible? I don't think we've ever ruled a town out by saying it's not historic, or it doesn't have enough heritage, or it's not historic enough. So we funded projects, everything from medieval to pre-medieval towns, plantation towns, planned estate towns, those established around local industries. We even funded, in partnership with Cork County Council, Bantry Library, which is in the late 1960s, early 1970s, a really interesting brutalist library in Bantry Town. So we've never said a town or a building isn't historic enough. We've tended to avoid urban centres designated as special regeneration areas. The other change this year is we've removed the population cap of 1,500. If it's 1,100, if it's 1,200, we're not ruling towns out. Housing for All came in from 2022. We were encouraged to look at proposals to bring vacant or underused floor area in historic buildings back into residential use. This has been hard, largely because of costs and the timeframes involved. But we still are really, really interested in seeing applications that relate to that. And this is a key point, and it goes to answer a question posted earlier. Grants which specifically address residential reuse by encouraging owners and occupiers to invest in appropriate conservation-led works and repairs may be phased over 2 years. So in this case, 25-26, subject to a maximum award of 350,000. If it's a standalone building, so say a library, a courthouse, Swatches owned Lenties was 1 year, because we received this funding on a yearly annual basis. And in other words, because we don't have multi-annual funding, we prefer to try get that done over 1 year. And we do appreciate that that's tight, that's difficult. But what you heard about today in terms of Middleton Library, we had to make an exception on that one because of difficulties in procurement. So what we'd say is make it really clear in your application what your envisaged timeline is, and then check your letter of offer for details of how funding is to be spent over the 2 years. Stream 2, then the Heritage-led Regeneration Plan. This is 1 year. What this is about, examine the existing heritage of a town and determine what conservation-focused interventions are required. So you would have seen that for Passage West and Monaghan Town this morning. The idea is that the plan will ultimately inform future grant applications. So under this Stream 2 plan strand, we'll award up to 50,000 per town. We will look for a 20% match funding, and you can apply for Stream 1 and Stream 2. What works are eligible? Capital works that include heritage-led regeneration projects designed and implemented by local authorities. Projects that encourage private owners and their occupiers to invest in conservation-led works and repairs and bring vacant floor area and historic buildings back into use. Projects that address dereliction and vacancy, landmark buildings, maintenance and general improvements to streetscapes, conservation-led public realm works, which encourage investment from other sources. Projects that build resilience in the historic built environment of the town and able to withstand the effects of climate change. Just on that, it was great to see the Swift boxes on the Glenties Courthouse. That's certainly something we'd love to see more of. And then this is a new line this year. Architectural conservation areas. We'd love to see applications which think about the ACA, to promote it, support it, and show value in it to local residents and owners. Sometimes you get the impression that the ACA, just as a designation, it needs all the support it can get. So the application process for 2025, and Amanda will cover this, 1 historic town per stream. Sorry, I've missed that. That's a mistake. We've lifted that for this year. It's not one historic town per strain, and it's not 1,500 inhabitants. We're not hung up on the 1,500 population level, and you can apply for, where you have the capacity, more than one historic town per strain. So that's a correction. Application should set out the significance of the town and its heritage, any relevant policies and objectives, the town's track record to date, and we love to see your conservation officer and or your heritage officer. And I think what you saw in Donegal is both involved, and that has certainly shown a huge return for Donegal County Council, that partnership. What's the vision of the town set out in any relevant management plan, conservation plan, public realm plan, etc.? How it would promote heritage-led regeneration? What partnerships have you got? The extent of matching funding, contribution in kind, and then leadership. Just who's driving this? Who do we talk to? Who do we visit? Who do we check in with when we're over the course of the project? The criteria then, this is all in the guidance, which is online. 30%, the extent to which private owners and occupiers or community groups would bring and keep vacant or unused floor area and historic buildings in use. How it will address dereliction and vacancy. In other words, how to give a town a lift. 20% then the town's track record to date in heritage-led regeneration. What kind of projects have you been doing? What kind of plans have you been doing? How does it fulfill the aims of the scheme? 20% then the quality of the projects proposed. 15% then how build resilience. Is it bringing people back into the town centre? Is it making the buildings more resilient in terms of their rainwater goods, improving the thermal efficiency? And then the presence of a vibrant and engaged community, 15%. That's typically shown by letters of support and other partners. I'm now going to hand over to Amanda Ryan, and then Amanda, you just tell me when you want the slides moved on. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Ian. Hi, everybody. I won't keep you long. I've only a few short slides. So basically, I suppose the main change for us in terms of housekeeping this year is that we introduced a new online grant system in 2024. So if you are familiar with our grants in the past, you'll know our older system. So you will need to register as a new user this year if you weren't involved in a grant funded project in 2024. So the link to the new online systems on our funding page, online grant system. We've already set up all the local authorities as organisations on the system, but as a user, you will have to register against your organisation. So next slide, please, Ian.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, sorry. So when you click the register button, search for your local authority. And I would say if you're a municipal, sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, district or office within a county council, please, or city and county council, please stick with the actual overall local authority. Don't start setting up a whole new organisation, because payment more than likely will go to the main local authority if you are funded, if you are grant funded. So you just search for the local authority under the organisation name and then continue to fill in your own contact details. Once that's submitted, that will generate an automated email from grants@heritagecouncil.ie. Now, we are aware that in certain local authorities, this email is being blocked by security settings. So rather than waiting days and days for this email to come in, just if you don't get it fairly instantaneously, it's more than likely blocked. So just whiz off a quick email to grants@heritagecouncil.ie and we'll set up a temporary password for you and get you on the system very quickly. Next slide, please, Ian. So once you're logged in, you'll see the main homepage and current grant schemes. We've 6 currently opened. So click on this and then you'll see a list of options. I think Historic Towns is number 4 on the list. So just click Apply Now. So Ian, next slide, please. Now, this is just general advice, and can't stress it enough from administering all our grant schemes is please read the guidance, scheme guidance. That is the most important thing. Do allow plenty of time to do your application. I would suggest that if you are thinking about doing an application, that you get onto that registration process straight away. Don't leave it until the week before. We had a closing date for a grant scheme yesterday, and people were contacting us in the afternoon because they hadn't received a password or they wanted to register. That is too late. So please, as I said, if you are thinking about doing it, get on and register your name, and at least you have access to the application form. If there's any issues, we can have them addressed then. On the final day, there's always, even though it's a cloud-based system, we always find that things do slow down. People are trying to upload documents. So I would say if you have documents to upload, do those as you go along, and sooner the better, rather than leaving them all to the final day. Complete your application. Ian has touched or has spoken about the 5 assessment criteria. So that's what you keep in mind when you're filling in the application form. Put yourself in the assessor's shoes, because they're going to be looking at the detail in the application and scoring that against what you have responded to. Make sure that you demonstrate that minimum match funding. It's 20%. It must be a cash contribution, not benefit in kind. The assessors will be only scoring your application on the information received, so don't assume anything, or they can only assess on what has been provided, and we can't accept information after the deadline date. The application is a template form, and so you have the option to upload additional information. This must be in PDF format. If it's not in PDF format, it won't upload. So make sure all your documents are PDF'd. Maximum, we like to keep it to about 10 megabytes. Now, while that's not strictly policed, in terms of us checking the information afterwards, it does speed up the assessment process if documents are accessible and easily opened. We don't want documents 60 and 70 megabytes. They're just not accessible. And also there'll be delays in uploading them. File name, please, this is just minor things, but they can make assessors contrary. Put captions on your files. Don't just upload these generic numbers and people are trying to figure out then what are we looking at. So put a caption that goes with the content. Files uploaded will be checked for viruses, and if you get a notification, don't panic. You can continue to work on your application and click that submit button. So next slide, please, Ian. So just a few examples of additional information: conservation works methodology, copies of quotation prices, briefs, anything like that, copies of previous plans, surveys, evidence of appropriate consultation. So that will be particularly for community groups and private businesses or owners, house owners, that you have letters of support. I think 2 is the minimum. So if the more you have, the stronger it will demonstrate the collaborative approach to your plan. For Joe and Colette gave very good presentation. There's just a moment ago, and theirs is a great example of where we term it onward funding, where they administer almost a mini grant scheme to private owners or community groups. So we want to be explicit in your application, and you need to think about that. If you are going to be giving grants to homeowners, how is it going to be administered? What kind of terms and conditions are going to be put in place? Joe has a fantastic template and legal document already done, and I hope Joe doesn't mind me saying he's a very good person to talk to if you are thinking along that lines, because it's a very good model. The way they have set up their onward funding is a really, really good model. It's following really good practice in governance, and that's what we want to see. Current, clear and captioned photographs are vital. Assessors love pictures, can't emphasize that enough. And also a map of your local area, and if there's any designation to highlight that as well. I think next slide, Ian. And that's it really. But again, to emphasize, if you have any issues at all on the housekeeping front or getting access onto the system, contact us sooner rather than later. We will, especially on the last few days, we will be monitoring the system closely. But as I said, get your registration sorted and contact us if that password email doesn't come through, and we will be able to set up a password for you very quickly, and you'll have no issues after that. And on the day as well, or even coming up, if you have issues uploading anything, again, contact us. We can't help you at 5 to 5 if there's big panic mode and you're trying to get an application in, but we can help you if you contact us earlier in the day, or indeed even better, ideally, throughout the weeks coming up to that deadline date. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Amanda. So I think we've probably thrown a lot at you there. If there is anything we haven't answered, do drop us a line. The best address, the easiest one, is probably grants@heritagecouncil.ie, and between the grants team, Amanda and myself, we will answer it. I see one question there. If 2 projects are submitted, is the funding capped at 350 per project or per county? It's 350 per project. I think I hope we've answered all the other questions in the presentation. So look, as I said, contact us if you have any other queries, but thank you so much for attending and listening and staying with us. I'd also like to say thank you to Virginia and Dan for the comments at the start, and then all of our speakers, Cara Ward, Katya Popovskaya, Colette O'Connor, Raymond Higgins, Joe Gallagher, Colette Beattie, and then my colleague Amanda Ryan as well, for all the time and effort in making those presentations. And like a broken record, 14th of February is the deadline.
And sorry, Ian, just somebody has asked in the questions, this is being recorded, so we'll just do a little bit of editing to beautify us all.
Yes.
And it will be posted on our website in the next few days. So if some of your colleagues haven't been able to attend, it'll be there for them to watch over.
Okay, so look, any other queries or questions, let us know and we'll try and answer them as quick as we can. So thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thanks, guys.